Yeah. I wake up to a little bit of
What's good, everyone? Welcome to the Bucks Film Room podcast. My name is Brian Sampson. I'm the host. You can find me on Twitter at Bucks Film Room. I write about the Bucks on Forbes, Sports, on Dairyland Express. And today I'm super excited, or I was super excited until the Bucks game actually happened, but have a great guest with me today. First guest of this podcast, Jake Reetz. You can follow him on Twitter at Jaja Reetz. Jake, one word, what's your feelings coming into the pod today?
If you asked me before the game, it would have been like super excited. I felt great about that first game, but I felt a little bit nervous going forward on where we're at, where we're kind of headed these next couple games, but still super excited on the outlook of the season.
Yeah, it was really a mixed bag of a first week. Had the big win against Philadelphia that the Bucks really flirted with running away with it, but ended up pulling out. It was a 1-point victory after that last second three. And then tonight, or depending on when you're listening to this, on Sunday night against the Hawks, they just got whooped really from the beginning. So Jake and I are here to talk about the game. And one thing that we want to do, or I want to do with this podcast to set it apart, is really dive into some of the film. I know it's a podcast, so we're going to walk you through, what Jake is seeing. Jake is an expert. Again, if you don't follow him on Twitter, you should. He breaks down film, really one of the best Bucks follows out there, head basketball coach as well. And so, Jake, whether it be about the Philly game, let's start with the Philly game. What were some of your main takeaways from the Bucks 76ers game?
Dame Lillard is special. He covered up some of the flaws, I thought, down the stretch where Giannis was kind of settling at times. The spacing didn't look quite right, but Dame Lillard able to kind of get in his bag, the step back three. We saw some of the looks when they're running sets with the double high ball screen, him able to get downhill, attack the bigs. I thought he was just special. And that was my biggest takeaway, definitely from game one.
So that double high ball screen, I know that it's been talked about a lot. I want to touch on that a little bit because that was really what was it the second quarter that we saw that? So can you walk us through what was the thought process behind that? Why was that working, and what was Dame Lillard able to do that to take advantage of that?
Yeah, so one of the issues the Bucks are kind of running into, we saw it even more so tonight, is that teams are liking to trap the initial ball screen, and then when Giannis is setting it, have their center as the weak side rim protector, and him kind of mucking up the paint, taking Giannis on the roll. And Giannis is kind of struggling right now in the playmaking aspect and finding that weak side, hitting someone diving to the dunker spot, anything like that. They're not having that movement. So what that double high ball screen does is now you're bringing Brook Lopez into the action. So by bringing Brook in, now you're forcing that center to have to play at the level of the screen, just in case Dame comes off that side. Now he's going to have an open look if your center's not up at the level. So now if he goes off Giannis's side, you don't have that weak side rim protector able to muck up the paint. So now you saw it multiple times with like Tyrese Maxey on the weak side or Tobias Harris, and those guys aren't going to be able to stop Giannis when he's downhill. So just being able to lift that defender and kind of take him out of the play, out of the equation for the Giannis Dame pick and roll was something that they needed to do, and I think they need more. So even you could have saw more of that tonight.
Because what you're talking about is really Embiid, right? Embiid was guarding Brook Lopez in the corner and really just sitting in the paint. And I think Philly was okay with Brook Lopez shooting that corner three as long as they weren't giving Giannis a dunk or a shot at the rim. So they're putting Embiid in the middle of the paint, and then when Giannis would roll, he was there to help because PJ Tucker was on him as well. And so then by bringing Brook Lopez into the action, then Embiid couldn't be in the paint and actually had to be up on the 3-point line. And that's when we saw Lillard really attack the paint. I think on one of those plays, he did a great job using his body, using his shoulder, getting into Embiid's body and then hitting a little step back. So what kind of counters do you think defenses can do to try to adjust that so they can keep their center big man off of that action?
Yeah, you could see teams kind of pre-switch that where they had their big stay with whoever's in the corner. One thing that the Bucks did well though was doing it in transition or a secondary break. So they're doing it before the center's able to get all the way back into the paint. So by having it in transition, now that center's rotating back into defense and he has to play at the level right away. If they were running like a half court set or out of like a sideline out of bounds, it'd be easier for the defense to kind of set that up where then their big just switches it prior to the initial action and have whoever's in the corner go guard the ball screen and still have that weak side rim protector. You could also see, I know the Knicks run a lot of like fly switching where If Dame is able to turn the corner, they'll have their guy defending the corner switch on to Dame, and then the guy who is defending the ball screen switch out to the corner. You can run some different schemes like that. But when they're running in transition like that, it's very hard to defend.
One thing that'll be interesting to see too. So you're talking about the pre-switching. So say in that Philly game, they put Embiid on somebody in the corner. So if it's Damian Lillard with the ball, and then Giannis and Brook Lopez setting those high screens, when they're fully healthy, you'd have Malik Beasley and Chris Middleton in the corners, right? So like, who are you going to help off of? They're both
Right.
near or 40% 3-point shooters, and so that's really the fun aspect of the Bucks offense this year, if or when they're clicking on all cylinders.
And the other thing you do that too, if they were to pre-switch that, you can then immediately go into a kick to that guy and then run a pick and roll with that guy. Now with Embiid guarding the ball handler, that's a lot tougher. Or you go into an ISO or something like that where you don't necessarily use the action. If you get that switch, you switch up the action and just counter that way.
That's really the fun part. So the last 5 years we've had Mike Budenholzer going into the season. We really knew what to expect. He was a great coach, and a lot of his stuff though was predictable, right? You knew exactly what kind of defense they were going to run, exactly what kind of offense. Now with Adrian Griffin, we're really kind of exploring the new Bucks, right? Is still some players returning, but all these different schemes and changes that they can do. And really one of the goals of this podcast is to help us dive into that, because basketball, one thing I hear a lot of that drives me crazy is like, oh, defense is just about effort, but also there's a lot more that goes into it, like all this stuff that you're talking about, the pre-switching, and then how's Milwaukee going to counter it, and then Philly, they're going to counter it again. So like in a playoff series, they're really going to go back and forth with these, and some of it might even be in-game adjustments, but some of it also might be game to game, and so it's really just continuing to evolve and adapt to each other's strategies.
Yeah, we even saw a horns look, I believe, and Middleton was one of the screeners, I believe, and then Paul Reed got switched onto him, and then Middleton went into a ball screen, ghosted it, and Dame ended up coming off that ball screen that Chris ghosted and got an and 1-3 on it. But that was Chris reading, oh, they're going to switch Paul Reed onto me. Let me go in this ball screen where now Paul Reed's into the action, and he's having to cover Dame. So it's stuff like that where Chris is a really good connective piece because he kind of has that IQ where feel for the game, where if someone's switching onto him, he knows what to do, whether he's go to a post up, go to a screen, kind of that connective piece. I think for the Bucks, that's going to be really important for him.
So Middleton didn't play on Sunday night against the Hawks. Bucks have a back-to-back, so they play Monday again against the Heat. How worried are you about Middleton and his health right now?
I'm not too worried. Not too worried at all. I think playing it safe after a knee surgery is kind of necessary. If it weren't for last year, I don't think anyone would be really talking about it. But it's just the fact that he missed so much last year. It's just kind of felt like an ongoing process. But obviously, this was a different injury. He knew he was going to have to get surgery for this. So, not too concerned. I like them playing it safe with him.
Yeah, I think he told, was it Chris Haynes from Yahoo Sports or somebody, that he expects to be back to his full minutes by game 7 or 8.
Yeah.
That was surprising for me. That seems pretty soon. I mean, game 7 or 8, if you think about it, we're already on
Yeah.
game 2. By the end of this week, by Friday, Bucks will be on game 5. So we're looking at like a week and a half away if that timeline holds true. And in the first game, he only played 16 minutes. So I think he played, if I'm remembering correctly, he played 2 6-minute stints in the first half, played the first, I think, 4 minutes to start the second half. And then I was expecting him to come back in. I thought they were saving him for the last 6 or so minutes of that game, especially against the 76ers when it was coming down the stretch. But they kept him out, and they were able to make it work. But I like your point about how good of a connector he was, or he is. And really, being a third option, that's his money spot. I think is second option maybe a little bit too much. Third option, when he's getting that ball off the rotations, that's really where he can make his money. I'm excited to see what he can do. I mean, he played well in the playoffs. Moving to the Sunday night game against the Hawks, what were some of your takeaways? What happened there on offense? Let's start on offense. What happened there? Why did Milwaukee struggle so much?
I think one of the things to start the game, I don't think Giannis was ready to be a facilitator as much as he needs to be, especially starting games and with Brook Lopez in the lineup. With those teams that are using a center as a weak side rim protector, it really mucks up the paint for Giannis. And on top of that, they're collapsing from the corners. So he needs to read the floor a little bit better. When he's catching that short roll, he's immediately putting the ball down and kind of looking to get right to the rim. And I think he just needs to take a beat. I thought in his later stint in the third quarter, He started to slow down a little bit, catch and evaluate, and then read the defense, and was making a couple kick out passes, hit a couple threes off that. I think he needs to do more of that to start the game. And I think that kind of threw off the flow in that whole first half, was him trying to get to the rim and just not finishing over 3 or 4 defenders. Outside of that, I would say offensively, just the spacing with Brook and Giannis, they tried some high-low looks and just didn't connect on it. I think that's going to be important for them. I'm trying to think what else. If you want to spit off that.
So with Giannis, I was messaging you or DMing you on Twitter about this. I was surprised how kind of off guard he seems to be on these short rolls. So when he's setting
Yeah.
the screen for Dame and he catches the ball, he seems to really be out of sync. At one point against the 76ers, he took like 3 steps, then hop step before he even dribbled or without dribbling. And he just seems to be so out of sync or not used to having the ball in his hands with a 4-on-3 advantage, because that's really what it is, right? So Damian, when he sets that ball screen for Lillard, and we'll talk about his screens later, his screens need improvement. But when he sets the screen on Lillard, 2 guys are coming out there. So then when he catches a pass, Giannis has 2 guys on his backside, so closer to the other team's basket. It's a 4-on-3, and he seems to be flabbergasted. He doesn't know what to do. What's your take on that? I mean, I think that he'll adjust, but I've just been surprised that he's been so out of sync so early.
Yeah, it looks like he hasn't like fully processed on like the spacing and where he's at on the court and where the defense is going to be. So this is, I think, game 3 now of, because the Lakers ran a similar coverage where they're having that weak side rim protector every time in the preseason. Game 3 of it, I think it'll probably take at least another, I don't know, five games or so before he really starts to get in a rhythm of it. But it's just seeing that second side when they're over helping from that weak side corner. It's going to take some time, I think. But also, I think there's an issue with the spacing too. With Brook Lopez, he's too often, I think, spaced in the corner, and it's too easy for that weak side defender to X out and zone out on that weak side when Brook's out there. Not as big of a threat to put it on the ground and attack closeouts. So you pretty much just have to run him off the line. And then I'm losing my train of thought.
No, you're good. So I think
Yeah.
one thing with Giannis is, so watching Jokic is an elite processor. He can read defenses. He can anticipate 1 or 2 moves ahead. Giannis, I think he needs those reps. He needs to know where somebody is going to be. He needs to understand, all right, when I catch the ball, I'm going to have guys in the corners, or I'm going to have a guy in the dunker spot, or guys in the corners. I think he needs those repetitions. He's an above average passer for sure. I would say he's a good passer, but he's not an elite passer like Jokic. And so I think some of this will be just is going to take him time to get familiar with, instead of having guys in those blue squares all around the 3-point line. He needs to know where guys can or can't be, because Adrian Griffin, he doesn't want his offense to be as predictable as Budenholzer did. He wants guys to mix things up, to cut to the basket, to find those open spots. And I think part of that will be Giannis needs to figure out then he can't just always rely on guys being in the corners. He needs to figure out where else they can be. So
yeah, I totally agree with that. And I'd add to that. I think where Brook Lopez on the court is going to be the big problem solving the Bucks will have to do, whether he's in the corner or in the dunker spot, or if they showed it a couple times where he was doing roll and replace, where then he would start in the dunker and move to the top of the key. I think they're going to have to keep diversifying that, so it's not easy for the backside or the weak side to zone out and know exactly where he's going to be, because that's pretty much who they're helping off of every time. So figuring out ways to diversify those looks as well as that spacing is going to be important.
Yeah, and so moving to the other end of the court, their defense. How concerned should we be about the Bucks defense? They just gave up 127 points to the Hawks. They actually outscored Atlanta in the second half. They won the second half and still lost
that's a
by
win.
17. Yep, building some momentum. So Damian Lillard, we know he's a great offensive player. Defense questionable. They can live with that. What my issue is his backcourt partner, Malik Beasley. I think the Bucks are trying to convince themselves that he can be a defensive stopper. We've never seen it in his career. Through 2 games, we definitely haven't seen it. Where are you at with the Bucks defense overall?
I actually think Malik has played really well defensively. I don't know if he's the main issue. I think he's fine. Defensive stopper part is probably part of the problem. Him being your best backcourt defender is probably part of the problem. I think he's been good though. in that role for the most part. Outside of that, I think their wing defense is where they need to make an improvement. I think Marjan's minutes are really important, especially if they want to play up and in transition. Defensively in transition does not look good, especially because if Brooks in the dunker, he's transitioning back late. You don't have those big athletic wings to kind of stop the ball in transition or protect the rim if need be, if Brooks not back there or if Giannis is off the court. So I think the wing defense has been questionable. Crowder's played pretty well, but he's not that wing stopper in transition. Same with Pat. Pat has had his struggles in these first 2 games of shooting the ball, but defensively, I think he gets lost on screens a little bit. Is not really that ball stopper that you kind of need from your wings. So I think that's more of the glaring hole right now.
Yeah, so we think about wing. It's what we have: Beasley, we have Crowder, Connaughton, Middleton, and Beauchamp, right? Those are really the
Yep.
4 primary wings. And out of that group, Crowder has the best history of being a defender. He might be more of a forward defender at this point in his career. Doesn't have the quickness. He can maybe body with some guys who are trying to post him up, a la Jimmy Butler when the Bucks play that Monday night. That might be more of his jam, not this Trae Young or Tyrese Maxey or even DeJounte Murray type thing.
Yep.
So out of that group, so what do we have? Beasley, Beauchamp, Connaughton, and Middleton. Which guy would you start? Would you keep running with Beasley, or how would you, or how do you think this alignment will go moving forward?
I don't think Beasley's the long-term solution. I think it eventually goes to Marjan. I think Griffin's playing it right, I think, by kind of letting Marjan earn those minutes. Beasley's more of the proven NBA vet at this point, so letting him get that first run at it, I think, is the right decision. But overall, I think Marjan's athleticism, I don't think you necessarily need that 3-point high volume shooter in that role offensively with the starters. I think it could be more of a defensive specialist that can knock down an open 3 if need be, keep the ball moving offensively, and let it find Dame and Giannis and Brooke and Chris. I think that's more important for that role. So finding that kind of happy medium between the 3-point volume and the defensive specialist is what they need. I think it's more a defensive specialist though at the end of the day.
How much do you love Beauchamp?
I love Marjan. I stand him. Yep. I think there's definitely some growing pains in there. He's not perfect. He's going to make some rookie mistakes, even as a sophomore in the league. You saw him pick up 3 quick fouls in that first quarter on Trae. That's a tough matchup for anyone, but especially a bigger wing that doesn't necessarily have the foot speed to stay with Trae. And Trae's crafty in drawing fouls. But I like that Griffin is using him in that role and kind of pushing him. So I think that's who they're going to need at the end of the day. And with this current roster as it stands, he's, I think, the best defender as far as on the perimeter out of that group. So
yeah, I think you and I are on opposite ends of the Beauchamp spectrum. Like, you're a big Beauchamp fan. I don't hate him, and I feel like I've been quick to call out his deficiencies, which is normal for a rookie, right? Especially the jump from the G League to the NBA. Like, that's a big jump to make. And so I have to say, though, being maybe one of his most truthful or objective analysts, that he played. I just had to throw that in.
A little bias there. A little bias.
Yep,
there.
yeah, for sure. Maybe subjective. How's that?
That's better.
But he played well against Philly. I think that when Lillard was going off offensively against the Philadelphia 76ers, he got a lot of that attention. But I think it was really Beauchamp who changed the game. He came in. Maxey had scored I think the first 7 points of the second quarter. He had 2 points at the end of the first quarter. He was going on a little run, and Beauchamp came in and really did a nice job on him. He wasn't perfect by any means, but you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be good. I think that he did a great job. He's got long arms. I mean, he sits down there in that stance, and his arms, his wingspan's got to be 6'10", something like that. I'd have to double check, but he did a great job of just using his broad shoulders. He was in the weight room. He was working this summer in the weight room, which I think will be helpful, but he did a great job just sitting down in his stance, using his long arms, funneling Maxey into the team defense. I thought that was amazing. I thought that was awesome how he did that. He gets caught on screens, which I think is part of his weakness, especially if he's going to guard like the Maxies, the Trae Youngs, those kind of guys. He'll need to work on that, and that strength will help. When you're fighting over the top of those those screens, especially, you need to just be able to fight through those and give him a little elbow, get skinny, slither through those. I think he'll be better at it this year. But I was impressed by that stance, or that stand that he had against Maxey. And then Griffin didn't go back to him, though. He played later in the half, but at least not that I recall. I don't know that he matched back up on Maxey as a primary defender. They used Beasley mostly during that, or mostly on him during the second half, if I recall correctly. But I was really impressed by that defense. I think he has that in him. It's the offensive processing now that I want to see as well. A couple times he caught the ball on swings. One time he had, it was either Beasley or Lillard wide open to the left, and he just kind of got sticky hands for a little bit, couldn't rotate it. But that he's had a good start to the season. They're not going to need the scoring aspect from him. It's going to all be on defense.
Yeah, I agree. I think the key point there is he uses his length and his wingspan. There's a lot of players out there that have it and they just don't use it. I think Griffin is teaching them. You can see Griffin has a different mentality defensively than Bud, and he's letting him play through those sophomore slumps or whatever, the rookie mistakes as a sophomore. And he's using that wingspan. He's getting into the guys, and same with Beasley. I think he's doing a good job of using his wingspan. You see those two, especially if they're one pass away, they're in the gap. They're using that wingspan to take away that driving lane and then recovering to their guy. I think that using those two effectively has been a strength or a positive in these first two games.
That gap defense of the Bucks is way different this year. You can see that they want to get in there in those driving lanes, even if they're one pass away. I think under Bud, they would stay more connected to their man, let the guy have that. But now you see him sliding over. They're taking away that dribble penetration. Griffin, he wants all the tips. He wants all the deflections. He wants those hands to be out there. So that's really something that stood out to me. So Lillard, I want to go back to this part about Damian Lillard. Sorry for the abrupt transition. So we talked about that double high ball screen, or the horns, or the V action, or whatever we want to call it. One thing that stood out to me was in the post-game press conference, Lillard said that was working in the second quarter, and then I'd stop calling it. And why he stopped calling it was because he wanted to bring it back later in the game in case it was a close game. And it was. So it paid off. And that high basketball IQ, to think of that, like a lot of times I feel younger guys or guys without that high IQ will say, all right, it's working. Let's spam it. Let's keep on running it. But he put it on hold. We didn't see it for a quarter and a half, almost 2 quarters. And then they came back to it late in the game, about 4 minutes or so left in the fourth quarter, and it worked again. Do you think that? So I think Giannis has a lot to learn on that aspect of it, where understanding defenses, reading defenses, but just the overall game. Do you think Lillard can help Giannis with that part of it, as far as teaching him how to read and understand the game better?
I think so, as long as the ball's in his hands. If he's the one calling the plays, I think him taking on that leadership role will just help in general. For Giannis, I think it takes more time for him to process the game within the game at times. You're seeing that right now with him in the short roll, kind of figuring that out. It just takes reps. So I think having Dame and how they want to play, I think the ball in his hands is going to be key. Especially if he's getting 2 on the ball, that's going to create so many advantages. It's just about Giannis kind of finding that sweet spot of when to pick my spots, when to get downhill, and when to hit the second side and trust the pass and trust that's going to get back to you.
Yeah, for sure. Any other main takeaways that you had from these first 2 games of the Bucks season?
Main takeaways. It's hard to have main takeaways after 2 games. I am just a little concerned about the Giannis Brook pairing offensively and how they're going to kind of configure that. We kind of hit on that going forward. I think when they went small, they put Bobby at center at times, and with Giannis off the court. And I'm not sure about those lineups, especially if they don't have a Marjan or even a Andre Jackson, just another kind of elite athletic wing to help in transition, help on rebounds, and stuff like that. I just a little concerned about those bench lineups with Bobby at center and no Giannis. And then offensively, I think Chris is going to be able to fix a lot of the issues that we saw tonight. Just having him on that second side, attacking closeouts, continuing ball rotations, just when things are stuck in the mud, him going ISO. I think he fixes a lot of those problems that we kind of saw tonight.
Yeah, Griffin's rotations have been interesting to watch in these first 2 games. He likes to sub Giannis out pretty early in the first quarter, and then really kind of stagger Giannis and Dame. And then in both of the first 2 games, he's gone with an all bench lineup for a little bit there toward the end of the third quarter, which has been interesting. They haven't gotten killed, but you can just see he's trying to just save a little bit of time there with both his stars on the bench. I agree with your take about Chris Middleton will really switch that, because then instead of two guys or two stars, he'll have Middleton to do what he wants. Middleton, you could put him with an all bench lineup. You could pair him with Giannis or with Dame, and he'll really kind of have his leisure to choose that. But it's been interesting to watch how he staggers those lineups. This has been fun, and I agree. 2 games you can't take away a lot, so these are just take them for what they're worth. They're just very small sample size, but this has been fun. It's a brand new era in Bucks basketball. We have some of the same players from the past. We have a whole new coach who thinks of the game a lot differently. You can bet that he's going to be upset. He's a defensive-minded coach who was a defensive-minded player. His team just got whooped at home in his second game. You can bet that that's not going to leave a good taste in his mouth. So moving forward, so the Bucks have 3 games coming up this week. Monday night, they play at home against the Miami Heat. Wednesday at the Toronto Raptors, and then Friday at home against the New York Knicks in their first in-season tournament. So let's start. So Monday night at home against the Heat, Milwaukee's going to be pissed, right? They just got swept. The Heat have been doing a lot of talking in the offseason, and that's their right. They won. You win. You can say whatever you want to say. After the Bucks traded for Lillard, Jimmy Butler went on to social media and said, "Look into the Bucks for tampering." Tyler Hero also then echoed that. Jimmy Butler sat out Saturday, I'm presuming, so that way he can be fully ready to go for this game. What are you looking for in this first Bucks Heat matchup of the season?
For Bucks Heat, I'm looking at defensively. I'm guessing the Heat will run a similar coverage to we've seen these last 2 games where they'll be trapping. I'm assuming they'll use Bam as kind of that weak side rim protector on Brook. I'm kind of hoping we see more Giannis at center lineups. I think that unlocks a lot, especially for Dame. It's going to be really hard for teams to put their center on Giannis if he's at center. And when he's running those DHOs and pick and rolls, it's going to really free up the guards, because either that or it's going to be, let's still trap, but then they're not going to have that weak side rim protector necessarily to stop Giannis on the rolls, and he'll just feast on that. I think that's going to be a key to unlocking a lot of this offense is Giannis at center. It kind of reminds me, thinking about it more, is what the problem with the Pacers had with Sabonis and Miles Turner when Sabonis was there. So Sabonis, when you have your 4 men you want to be screening a lot with, it's easier for teams to put their weak side rim protector and have him muck up the paint anytime he's rolling, right? You put 2 on the ball, easy to protect the rim still. It's when Sabonis went to the Kings now that he's running center, running all these DHOs with Malik Monk, with De'Aaron Fox, with Kevin Huerter. All those guys are just getting wide open looks now because you're so worried about the Sabonis role against a smaller defender on the weak side. So I think Giannis at center is going to unlock a lot if they run more of that. And I'd like to see him run more of that against teams that are going to use their centers as weak side rim protectors.
So if you have Giannis at center, who are the other 4 guys you think they should play in that lineup?
That's the big question mark, right? I think Crowder, Middleton, MarJon, and Dame. Those would be my 4. You get those 3 big wings next to Giannis. Yeah. I think that helps for rebounding. You get MarJon's athleticism to help in transition, which I think they would play very well with Giannis at center. And then obviously Dame's playmaking.
Yeah. I think especially those 3 wings, like you said, that would be interesting to see how that goes. One thing that I'm looking for in this Heat game is how the Bucks match up with Miami. Obviously, Dame is going to go on Lowry, but how will they guard Butler? I would assume. I mean, putting Malik Beasley on Butler to start the game just seems dangerous. He's skinny. Butler's going to body him, take him down low. The Bucks will do a lot of switching, at least similar position switching. So with that matchup, assuming Beasley is on Butler to start the game, I'm assuming they won't do a lot of switching with Beasley and Lillard, but they'll do a lot of switching with Beasley and Middleton. But I'm just interested to see how that goes. In the Bam matchup too, Budenholzer would always play Brook Lopez way off on Bam. So even if Bam caught it at the elbow, Brook would be way back just trying to contest. And so I'm curious to see how that goes and how Milwaukee will play that lineup. And in Miami, I mean, we talked a lot about the Bucks wanting that game, but the Heat have a way of flipping that, right? The Heat have a way of going from the hunted to the hunter. So I'm interested to see what kind of pace they come out with.
Yeah, that's interesting about them not switching because they didn't really show that in these first couple of games. They were switching pretty much 1 through 3 for sure, 1 through 4 at times. Switching Dame onto Maxey, switching Dame onto Trae Young. They were kind of willing to give up any kind of screen unless it was with Brook Lopez involved or Bobby involved at times. So that would definitely be a wrinkle they haven't shown these first couple of games. But Jimmy will definitely try to feast if they are switching those actions. He'll go right into the post up Dame. I was watching Boston and Miami the other day, and they're doing the same thing with Peyton Pritchard or Sam Hauser. Jimmy was going directly into the post with those guys. So I'm sure that'll be their game plan if the Bucks do switch.
Yeah. So Wednesday, Bucks play the Raptors. Adrian Griffin kind of playing against his former team. The Raptors they have a lot of new stuff going on. They start basically like 4 wings or 4 forwards, I should say, not wings, 4 forwards. They have a lot of length. That'll be interesting to see how that matchup plays out. Scotty Barnes, he's off to a good start to the season. I mean, it's only 3 games. Actually, funny. So the Heat, the Raptors, and the Knicks are all 1-2 going into this week. Bucks 1-1, but Scotty Barnes, he's playing really well, just doing a little bit of everything. How do you think the Bucks will look at that matchup? Or let's start offensively. How do you think the Bucks will attack that long-winged lineup of the Raptors?
Offensively, I think Brook Lopez will have to have a big game. Offensive boards, spacing out, knocking down threes. I think he's going to be an important factor for that game, especially playing wings. Him making himself big, though, maybe playing the dunker a little bit, getting lobs, things like that. Defensively, it's going to be important for Brook to be around the rim. I'm curious if they go back to how Bud used to match it up. He'd put him on Scotty Barnes and kind of just sag off. I don't know if they do some kind of wrinkle like that, especially if they're playing floor spacing wings out there and they don't have Brook necessarily out on the perimeter. So that'll be an interesting thing to monitor.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on the Raptors just because I feel like the Bucks should be able to have their way with them. I say that coming right off of a loss to the Hawks where they got dominated. But the real game, I think, well, so Miami, I think, will be the top game next week. But then the Knicks on Friday night. It's an in-season tournament. Jalen Brunson, he worries me. I think he can have his way with Beasley or Lillard. He really does. He's really crafty, and crafty as in he knows how to get his guys into the paint. He's stronger than both Beasley and Lillard. He knows how to draw fouls and he knows how to finish, knows how to get his guys involved. That's a matchup that I'm really worried about is how are they going to defend Brunson? In the past, Bucks could just stick Drew Holiday on him and not worry about it because Holiday was a great matchup for Brunson as far as size and physicality. They obviously don't have that anymore. So I'm really curious to see how they defend Brunson with that. RJ Barrett has it going on. They just have a lot of kind of score first guys. So that'll be a good challenge for the Bucks defense. The real question is, will teams take this in-season tournament seriously? So this is the first game of in-season tournament. So in the Bucks pool, they have the Knicks, they have the Hornets, they have the Heat, and they have, who else am I missing? One other team, the Wizards. So those are the 4 teams in the Bucks pool along with themselves. So this Heat game on Monday is not an in-season tournament. This Friday game against the Knicks is one. How seriously do you think Milwaukee and all the other teams will, like, do they care about the NBA Cup? Do you care about the NBA Cup?
That's up for debate. I'm not sure I care yet. I like that they're trying to make me care a little bit. I like the commercials about them. Those have been playing during the games. I'm definitely intrigued by them trying something new and trying to get me to care more about these meaningless regular season games. We'll see if it actually works out that way. It'll come down to, I think, if players actually are still playing. We're already seeing players rest 3rd game in. I'm hoping I didn't look at the schedule, but if there's any back-to-backs involved with these games, I would hope that's not the case. But if players are playing, I think it'll be meaningful once we start to get to the actual tournament part of it. I'm not so sure about these 4 games going into it, though.
For some reason, I feel like, and I'll get fact checked on this. I need to be, but for some reason, I feel like the Bucks have a back to back after one of those games, and I feel like they play the Nuggets. I feel like that happens every year. Of Bucks Nuggets, one of the teams is playing a back-to-back. It's on national TV, and then one of the teams or both of the teams don't play their star players. I feel like, if I'm remembering correctly, that's the case again, is after one of these games, Milwaukee plays Denver. I will need to double check that. Don't share that with your friends until you fact check that yourself, but I feel like that is the case once again. But yeah, as far as the NBA Cup, I like the idea. I agree with you. I like the creativity. I like how they are trying to build interest into that's November 3rd, into a November 3rd game. But I don't really care about it, to be honest with you. Like, if the Bucks drop that game, it means just as much as if they drop tonight's game or any other game. I'm not going to be more hurt about it just because it's an in-season tournament. If they win the in-season tournament, the only thing I would care about is that they have to play an extra game. That'd be my biggest concern, is then they're playing 83 games this year instead of 82. So I think that over time, they might be able to develop interest into it year one. I'm not too worried about it.
If they win, I will care, and we will be hanging a banner in the rafters, and we will have a parade, and I will be there.
You have to do that for the Heat game, though, not the Knicks, the Heat game.
Fair enough.
So yeah, I don't know all the dates again, but for the in-season tournament, they play the Heat, they play the Wizards, the Hornets, and the Knicks, and then I feel like the in-season tournament. So it's the top team from each pool, plus one wild card team from each conference. So the wild card team is the team who didn't win their pool but had the best record in pool play. So they'll go on to kind of the playoffs or whatever they're calling it. And then if you advance, it's in the beginning, middle-ish of December. So we'll see how these games play out through November and how they move forward. Anything else, Jake, that you're looking forward to for this week before we wrap up?
No, it's just great to have Bucks basketball back, despite the loss tonight. I'm super excited about this season, the direction of the team in general. I'm not sure if the roster is completely set as is. There'll be growing pains in some of the sophomores playing, the rookies playing, but I'm super excited about Bucks basketball this year.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully, we can have Jake on later. He's got a hot take that he's cooking up. It's not ready to come out of the oven yet. We're not going to give any hints, any clues on it, but maybe later in the season, when he's ready, when it's fully baked, we'll have him come on the pod and share it. So you can follow him on Twitter at Jaja Reetz. Does great work breaking down Bucks film. Really tremendous. You'll learn a lot from him. So Jake, thanks for hopping on.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
And everyone else, you can catch this podcast every Monday. It's on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and now on YouTube. So make sure to subscribe and rate us. Really appreciate it.